Well, hello and welcome back to another edition of Keto Fireside Chats. This is going to be another HobbitCast featuring Ben McDonald and Karen. We're going to be going through a few topics here, mostly related to macros using, fat as throttle. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting, some safe levels, maybe even run through the calculator a little bit and show you some stuff. Before we get started, just wanted to throw a quick pimping for Scott's beautiful little cookbook here, Keto-Fi Everything. Got a little picture of it up on the screen. You can get to it right from his website. It's pretty cheap and has some beautiful pictures and some nice physical things that you can get almond flour all over as you're cooking stuff. So with that, let me introduce my co-host, Karen. Hello, how you doing?
I'm great. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So, Karen, we're here to talk about some macros.
Yes. I get a lot of questions in both the groups about macros. Exactly how much of what should we be eating?
Why does it even matter to have such a precise amount of macros dialed in?
Well, you want to make sure that you are getting enough. And you also want to make sure that if you're putting all this effort into changing how you eat, that you're not going to just sit there at the same weight if your purpose is to lose fat. So we have the macros that people can put in their own statistics and figure out from those numbers what meal composition should look like.
So you're telling me the only way I can lose weight is by being very precise in the amount of food that I'm eating?
No. You can do all kinds of crazy things and still lose weight, but eventually it'll catch up with you. This way, you know that you're doing things safely, that you are getting enough nutrition, and that you won't reach that dreaded stall if it's done correctly.
Yeah, so let's, I'm actually going to throw up a picture of macros as we would normally present them. This is right off the calculator from SheCallsMeHobbit.com. This is the one we kind of hand out in the Facebook group all the time now. So we've got 4 big numbers: daily calories, protein, fat, and carbohydrates.
Yeah. So
what are your thoughts about protein? Like when you're doing macros for people, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm often thinking about their sources of protein, and I want to make sure that they have a sizable amount, just so that they'll feel satiated when they eat, and that they're not gorging themselves on chicken. They have enough to make the meal substantial, so it's not just, a salad with some sad little pieces of dried chicken breast on them.
2 slices of deli ham.
Delicious. I don't mind the 2 slices of deli ham as long as it's got a couple eggs thrown in there too.
There we go.
Then they can do that.
Yeah, when I think about protein, for me, I kind of use 50, 60 grams, depending on how tall you are, is the absolute bare minimum for daily input. Yeah. We know that somewhere north of 40 grams is your biological minimum, and we're going to assume that your body missed a few grams. So when I'm handing out macros, I would never hand out less than 60, and that's pretty low. I'm normally in the 70 to 100 range for women, and more like the 90 to 130 range for men.
You do need to eat your protein. You don't want your body will find the protein if you don't eat it.
That's
right. If you
get
into those dangerously low levels, then you're going to compromise your results. You're going to compromise how much energy you have during the day.
Exactly. And, to a point that you kind of alluded to, but I really want to hit a really strong, is protein makes you feel full. If you don't get enough protein in a meal, you can eat a lot of fat, and fat definitely, kind of helps with the energy levels and kind of coating your stomach and making you feel full. But if you didn't get enough protein, you won't feel full. So when I'm thinking about that, I always want to make sure that I'm balancing protein with the fat, especially for folks that are pretty severely obese, that have a pretty high fat calorie count. You know, when you start getting into the fats over 150, 160, you know, that if you're not giving people enough protein to offset that much fat, it turns into a really weird plate. Like trying to make the meal composition when you have a 75-gram protein and 160 grams of fat, that is a weird bowl of food, man. I don't like that at all.
Bacon wrapped avocado floating in a pool of coconut oil.
Exactly. And that's exactly right.
I've got some soup I want to make for you.
You know, I found, especially in older women who are pre-diabetic, if you give them too much protein, it can actually cause weird stalls. You know, especially when you start getting over 100 grams. So I'm very hesitant. If somebody tells me weight loss is their goal, I'm hesitant to give more than 100 grams of protein for most folk, especially women, just because they just do not respond favorably in my experience. Have you heard from people who you've given a lot or a little to as working well, or, you know, I'm sure like me, you're getting a lot of the PMs of, hey, I'm stalled, please help.
Yeah, usually, you know, as long as they're getting between 70 and 100 for the women, for the little itty bitty women, usually it's between 70 and 80. They're not having too much problems, but it's when they get into that sort of old-fashioned thinking that we had, you know, 20 years ago, where you ate all the protein, and so they're getting 120, 130 grams that things can go sideways on them.
Yeah, and there's a real popular group on Facebook called the Optimum Ketogenic Living. You know, that's Raymond's little thing, that OKL chart that everybody likes.
Yeah, and I was wondering why everyone seemed to have this number of 120, and I found out that's where it's coming from.
That's right. It's a popular group. It's a popular theory. And there is some interesting science behind why they feel that 120 grams is correct for everyone. My experience, many of the admins, we don't think 120 is right for a lot of people, especially if you're not very athletic. And if you're older, you know, over 40, especially if you're a woman, 120 grams is just too much.
It's a lot to eat.
Well,
that would be a challenge.
No problem for me. I had no problem with 120.
I could do it. It just the next day, I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for folks like you know, me, Scott, Mike, we're easily eating 120 to 160 every day, but we're also athletic. We're lifting. We've been eating keto for a while. We've got that Viking stomach that can handle that much protein. I mean, you start eating, like you said, you start eating, you know, 2 chicken breasts for lunch. There will be consequences.
Yeah, it may or may not have happened already. So,
so I guess the bottom line is what we're advocating is, for most people, you're going to find your protein, if you're a woman, between 75, 90, something like that. Yeah. If you're male, you should see your protein around 90 to 130, 140. And if you're outside of those boundaries, you need to be skeptical about what you're trying to accomplish and if it's right for you. You know, this is nutrition. There are no right or wrong answers. Everybody's got their own little weird scenario going on. I'm not here to, you know, tell anybody right or wrong. It's just, you know, we're playing to the Pareto line, the 80-20. Just like, you know, it's the bell curve. Most of the time, it's going to be inside that window, and then there's going to be exceptions.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fat, because this comes up all the time. So much we had to mess with the banner on the group. We get irritated. People are like, have a double fat bomb in a BPC.
Yeah. Well, you know, having that much fat at the beginning, the first few weeks, that's okay. You know, that's sort of going to get you over that hump. when you first start. And, you know, so if you're having a BPC when you're first getting into ketosis and learning the ropes, it's going to keep you full. It's going to keep your energy up. But if you keep doing that as you've lost, you know, you're into the 6 weeks, you've lost 20 pounds, it eventually will halt your fat loss.
Yeah.
Because your body will just take that fat that you're consuming. It's so much easier for your body to use that instead of the fat on your bottom.
Yeah. So everybody talks about, you know, ketosis is a high fat, low carb diet.
And it is.
So what do you mean if I'm not eating, you know, 1,800 calories of fat every day, it's not a high fat diet?
Well, it still is a high fat diet. I mean, if you're having, you know, 70 grams of fat, that's a lot of fat. You know, you are still eating fattier cuts of meat, eggs, maybe a little bit of high fat dairy. You're still having all those things. It's just you're not having all of your fat from your food. Some of it is coming from your body. You have a lot of fat stored on your body. Not you, Ben, but
how dare you?
other people. Me, I have a lot of fat stored on my body, so I still am utilizing. I'm my body is eating that fat.
Sure.
It's just it's no longer coming from 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream in my coffee. Now I have black or with almond milk instead. And then the rest of it comes from what I've stored over the last 20 years.
Yeah. And that's really the point is ketosis is a metabolic gimmick. It's not designed to be your normal operation. What we're doing is we're putting your body into a metabolic state where your hormones will preferentially harvest fat out of these energy stores that your body was designed to do. And you think about it, when you eat berries, when you eat bread, you know, what happens to people when they overeat or get a surplus of food energy? It's stored as fat. But then the problem is, over time, our bodies have evolved into this state of being constantly bombarded with carbohydrates. Our insulin levels up. We can never release that energy. Going into ketosis allows our bodies to freely mobilize that fat off of our caboose. And that's the goal if fat loss is why you're here. You want to be able to freely use that energy that your body so carefully stored around your midsection. And that's really the whole point of why we're going through all the trouble of counting carbs and all this other stuff, is to be able to run at a calorie deficit and use the fat that's stored on your body. It is a high fat diet, but it's not from your plate. And that's such an important point. It's such a subtle point that doesn't make sense for new people. It's so confusing. But that's also why you see the experienced keto folks on the board going crazy when people start talking about, I'm not hitting my fat macro, or I had to take 4 fat bombs to hit my fat macro last night. You know, BPCs.
Yeah, well, especially that's what we ask, how long you've been eating ketogenically. And oftentimes it's like 3 months, 4 months. And at that point, those fat bombs and the BPCs and all that sort of thing, they're like training wheels. You've got them at the beginning, but then you can take them off and keep flying.
That's right. I think that's such a difficult transition to make, is going from those meals where you're totally satisfied and really full to, you know, it's a diet. It's not necessarily going to be super easy. It's just a heck of a lot easier because your hormones aren't battling you. Because you've mastered them over the course of that induction period, that first 3 to 4 weeks. That's the advantage of the ketogenic diet over some of the other diets. I mean, you can lose weight. I mean, Admin Scott lost like 60 or 70 pounds just doing hardcore Viking level of calorie restriction. He just said, I'm just not going to eat, and then I'm going to lose weight. And he was miserable and grouchy and mad all the time. And that's not cool. Nobody wants to be around you while that's going on for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm. That's what the gimmick is that once you're not eating the fat, you're not hungry. With other diets, there's the constant hunger that just gets worse and worse and worse as you go along.
Okay, so let's say I'm a new member to the board. Hey, I've heard all about this ketogenic diet. It's great. LeBron James told me all about it. It's the easy way to lose weight. I'm here, So yep. What do I do? How do I get started with all this macro stuff? How do I figure it out?
Well, you would start by entering in your own information.
All right. So, well, let's do that for me. So I'm a male. So I am 40 years old. I'm getting very old.
No, you're not, because that means I'm old.
I'm a 6 foot, and I'm about to 220. Okay, so according to this, I am 42 pounds overweight.
Okay.
And I sit on my big fat caboose all day.
All right.
I do not exercise. So I'm going to choose sedentary.
Yeah.
Now, fat loss is my goal. So I'm going to tell the calculator to put me at about a 20% deficit. And I'm going to choose normal health because that's what most people should choose.
Yeah.
So that's giving me a BMR of 1800. And then once you add in breathing and thermogenesis and everything else, we're about 2250 calories. So 20% deficit tells me I need to be eating around 1,860 calories, 120 grams of protein, and 153 grams of fat.
Yep.
All right. So if I'm pounding away at 1,800 calories every day, what's going to happen?
You'll lose about a pound or 2 a week.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's it.
And there's nothing wrong with
that? No, that's real good. That's about 50 pounds a year, which it would put you in the top 1% of all successful dieters. And that's a painless 1 pound a week too.
It really is.
Let me tell you, if you're eating 153 grams of fat, 120 grams of protein every day, you got no problems in your life. You're feeling real good. You're eating big plates, big meals, easy peasy. Now, there's all these kooky admins that keep talking about intermittent fasting. That you can, once you're fat adapted, you can really step on the gas and increase your weight loss and improve your insulin resistance.
Yeah, we're kooky like that.
All that stuff. So why don't you talk about that and give us a quick overview on some of the 2 or 3 different fasting formats, and then we'll talk about how that impacts the macros.
Sure. Well, I can talk a little bit about how I started. After about 5 weeks eating ketogenically, following my macros, I started to not be hungry in the morning when I woke up. And I never really enjoyed breakfast that much before. So I just sort of stopped having it. Like I would be busy in the morning. I'm a mom. I'm busy. And then noon would come around and be like, oh, I should probably eat. So that's what you would call a sort of a 16-8 schedule. So you stop eating in the evening and then you resume again eating in the afternoon at around lunchtime. So you'd eat a couple of meals, maybe a light snack in the middle.
So we're really just talking about skipping breakfast.
Yeah, you just skip breakfast. So that is intermittent fasting. That is what a lot of our members tend to fall into. And it does start to help with insulin resistance. It gives your pancreas a little bit of a break.
So what happens to your body when you're not eating for a 16-hour stretch? That wouldn't happen to someone who has breakfast.
Well, you start burning a little bit of fat. So you would have that happening instead of burning your food. And you're also not dumping out insulin to deal with, let's say, if you weren't following this diet and you ate a big breakfast, to cover muffins or whatever, a bagel you have in the morning. So you got that going for you.
Sure.
Oh, there we go. It's got its 8-hour eating window right there. So you got that little bit of time there where in green, where you burn some fat, and then you store fat after lunch, and you store fat after dinner, and then you start burning fat again. You have that little dip in the middle too, where you burn a little bit of fat.
And why is it that you're doing fat storage right after those meals, but you're burning fat overnight?
Well, because you're burning the fat that you ate. And so that's why we get a little crazy when people are saying, "Oh, I'm skipping breakfast, but I'm having a BPC." Well, then you're missing out on that whole green area at the beginning because you're burning the BPC.
Right.
So the body will take the fat that you have, or it will take the fat that you eat.
Yeah. So let's talk about insulin resistance a little bit. I think that's one of the other things I just want to touch on. We'll save in-depth dive on that for another show. But,
yeah,
this is such an important topic for so many people.
It is. I think a lot of people don't realize that they are insulin resistant.
The my fantasy for the obese is that they gain control of their hormones.
Yeah.
The reason that you get big is because you've lost control of your insulin. You've lost control of your leptin and ghrelin. You're always hungry. Your energy stores can't be mobilized in the right way because your circulating insulin levels are too high. You wake up in the morning, your insulin is already running. You have 140 blood glucose. Waking up. I mean, that's insane. You got tablespoons of sugar just floating around your body for no reason while you're sleeping. Yeah. It's insane that a normal standard diet is going to put you into that state. And that's what's so awesome about ketogenic is it's going to get you into that mode where your body's insulin is going to decrease, and it's going to give your body a chance to burn off that excess sugar. It's going to give you a chance to mobilize that energy out of those fat, because insulin blocks that. When you're eating a trickle of carbs and having that 8 p.m. snack and filling up your belly with a few potato chips, you basically guarantee that you will lose 0 weight overnight.
Yeah.
So having 2 meals, not having snacks, gives you those insulin holiday, that break, so that those insulin receptors can relax, but more importantly, so the insulin isn't high, which allows it. If you have insulin in your blood, you cannot get fat out of the fat cells in your butt. Yeah. It's that simple. If you have insulin in your blood, you cannot lose weight. So during the periods following a meal, these red humps in this picture, you cannot lose weight because you have insulin, which is what happens when you eat, which is fine. And that's perfectly normal. But if your goal is to maximize fat loss, you need to give your body a break and lay off.
Yeah, and that's another reason why we're often mentioning snacking.
Yeah.
To cut it out. Just try to, eat enough at each meal so that you don't snack in between, because that's just going to keep on hitting up those insulin receptors.
All right. So let's say we're talking about this 16-8 eating window where they're eating 2 meals a day. Let's go back and just thinking about these macros here. What do I got to do here? Go back. There we go.
There.
I think it lost my settings, but whatever. So how does this affect the macros for our standard person here? They're going to put in their thing. They're going to have their daily calorie goal. This person has a 1350 goal, 72 protein, 118 fat. But we're also saying, hey, why don't you skip breakfast?
That's right.
So what do you do?
So, a lot of times in the group, we have people saying, okay, I'm skipping breakfast, but I'm having to shovel in these fat bombs at the end of the day to make up what I'm missing in my calories and what I'm missing in my fat. You don't want to do that. When it comes to doing the intermittent fasting, your meals are going to be bigger than they would have been if you're eating 3, but not so big as they would equal the same amounts as the 3 meals together. You want to get as close to the protein as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those meals are going to be, they're going to be over 30 grams. You want to try to get a goodly amount of protein in there, and enough fat to make it taste good. And of course, always staying under your 20 grams of carbs. And I know Scott has total carbs during induction. Some people do not. But basically, those 2 meals get close to 70. If it's only 60, fine. If it's only, 75 grams of fat, that's fine, because fat is your limit. You don't want your food to be so fatty that it doesn't taste good anymore and then your body has all this excess fuel instead of using what nature gave you.
Yeah. If your food is dripping, you may have gone overboard on fat.
Yum.
There's so many people. I was just looking at somebody's post, and they're like, "Oh, I had this awesome asparagus. I cooked it in bacon grease, and then I wrapped bacon around it." I'm just like, "Wow, that's a lot of calories, a lot of fat." And their goal is to lose fat, and they're eating, 350 calories of asparagus, which I didn't think was possible, but it is.
Butter up that bacon.
Yeah, you buttered bacon.
Butter up that bacon.
Yeah. When I think about intermittent fasting and the macros, in my mind, there's really 2 approaches. I think for people who are a little more active, people that are hitting the gym, who have found, they're doing that couch to 5K or whatever, or they're going to the gym and, lifting some heavy weights. I think it's pretty difficult to run at a deficit greater than 20%. You just get hungry and angry.
Yep.
I can't, if I am active in my normal way and I run at greater than a 20% deficit, that it just doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. I have to be close to that, which also means that I have to eat some pretty big meals if I'm skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
And that's where, we were kind of laughing about, having 2 chicken breasts for lunch or whatever, but
if you're not hungry,
that's not that crazy for me, because, here I am, I'm trying to get 120 grams of protein in. And in order to do that in 2 meals, that's 60 grams of protein, which is, that's a big chunk of chicken. That's a nice piece of meat.
Yep.
That's a lot of, that's in the 4 or 5 eggs. It's not nothing.
Nope.
So I want to make sure people understand that. But I think for most folks, if you're, your typical, dieter, you're 40 pounds or more overweight, and you're doing intermittent fasting for health reasons to try and reclaim that control over those hormones. The important thing is, for protein, you want to make sure that your plate has at least 30 grams of protein on it. That's a very reasonable target. So when you're eating, make sure that protein, that's where you want to start. Build your meal around that protein source. And then you can punch it up and fill it out as much as you need to get the calories that you think you need. But I don't even think you need to worry about calories at all. Karen and I both are big fans of Dr. Fung out of the Intensive Dietary Management Group. He wrote a book on fasting called The Obesity Code. It's fantastic. And I hand out YouTube videos on that all the time. For me, and the way that he approaches this is, he talks about satiety, eating until you feel comfortably fed, not stuffed, not unbutton my pants because I ate half a pound of bacon, but full. I'm satisfied. I've eaten a reasonable meal. It was a decent amount of food, and then just stop. Don't worry about calories. If you're constructing 30 grams of protein and you're eating a reasonable amount of fat using, our standard ketogenic style food, you should have no trouble with getting those kind of models. And you're going to find yourself somewhere in the 900 to 1100 calorie range for the day if you eat 2 meals constructed like that. And I think it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. If you went to a bariatric surgeon and said, staple my stomach, when it's all said and done, you're going to be eating 900 calories a day. And it's going to be about, 60 to 90 grams of protein and a very limited amount of fat and very, very low carb. So all we're doing is replicating that pattern using, nutrient timing. But it's the same thing. And it's not something you need to worry about. And it's very, very sustainable in a ketogenic mode. Now, if you are a carbohydrate person and you eat bread and donuts and Cheetos, what's going to happen when you start restricting calories that way, your insulin's going to remain high and your body's not going to be able to mobilize excess energy out off of your butt. So you do not have access to those calories, which means you're running at a terrible deficit. Your body will go into starvation mode and it'll start doing all kinds of crazy things. It'll slow down your heart rate. It'll slow down your blood flow. It'll affect your nails will get brittle. Your hair will start falling out, like crazy metabolic adaptations. You'll be cold in the middle of summer, like weird stuff. You won't be able to sleep because your body won't try to rest and rebuild muscle. So you'll be constantly sore and tired. Like so many bad things happen when you restrict calories that great. As we've been talking about, the most important thing about the ketogenic diet is when you are restricting dietary calories, you are not running at a calorie deficit on a global perspective. Your body can get to the energy that's stored around your midsection. Why do you think all that fat is there? It's because your body is stored it to use later. When insulin is around, you can't use it. When you're eating ketogenically, your insulin level is low and your body can easily use it. So it's not scary, it's not unsafe or unhealthy to run a deep calorie deficit for long periods of time. That's why ketogenic diet is so great for people who are obese. That's why bariatric surgeons love ketogenics, because they throw people that need to lose 100 pounds into these modes where they have very low insulin, and then they just let the body run off the energy that was stored. I mean, there's a famous case of a guy who fasted for 1 year. All he did was drink water, and he took a multivitamin too.
He did take a multivitamin, yeah.
But he had all the energy he needed, and that makes perfect sense if you think about it. The body is a well-designed instrument. It stored the energy. All we had to do was optimize the scenario to get the energy released, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're talking about. That's where all this comes in. So, Karen, let's talk about precision on macros. We go through all this trouble of doing this calculator, 1,351 calories, 72 grams of protein.
Exactly.
Well, what's with all the very precise numbers here?
They're a range. I mean, if you fall a little bit over, there's going to be another day where you're falling a little bit under. You need to be reasonable with this. We're out there living our lives, and it's never going to be perfect. But if you're weighing and measuring when you can, it will fall into place those days where you've been out at a barbecue and had an extra hot dog, and then you put it in your little calculator and realize, I'm 200 calories over. That's okay. There's going to be another day when you're 200 calories under.
Sure. Is there a macro that we really need to keep an eye on? I mean, obviously carbs are a non-negotiable piece of this.
With the carbs, when you're first starting, you want to keep it under 20 grams. As you go along and your fat's gone down, there are a lot of people that have more. I often have about 25 to 30.
Hmm.
In the summer, I do anyway, because the vegetables are better.
Yes, definitely.
I might go back to 20 in the winter when things are looking sad in the grocery store. But with the fat, you just have to look at the fat. The fat is a limit. So as you go along and as you're losing your own body fat, you just need to use that fat as a throttle so your body keeps using its own. Those are the ones that I'm looking at. What are you looking at?
Yeah, for me, the protein is usually plus or minus 30 grams off
Yeah.
of what, if we give you a target of 72 and you're getting at least 50, and sometimes you go as high as 90.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It'll all come out in the wash.
That's right. The other thing to remember is protein is 4 calories per gram, whereas fat is 9.
Yeah.
So fat, when you start messing around with fat, don't go over on fat, because that'll make your calorie count shoot up dramatically.
Yeah.
You go over 30 grams on fat, and all of a sudden we're talking about taking a 300 calorie deficit that was carefully constructed and turning it into a 100 calorie surplus.
Yep.
So, be a little cautious about going hard on the fat. I would say in general, you want to be at or under on fat. If you find yourself below 60 grams a day, then we need to have a long conversation about how you're constructing your meals, because that's going to be a problem for you. But as long as you're over 60 grams, who cares? And you should have no trouble eating 60 grams of fat if you're eating normal ketogenic stuff. It's when people start, ladling on the BPCs and the fat bombs and all these, the cauliflower crusted pizza that has 3 cups of Parmesan cheese.
Fathead.
Yeah, that's what they call it, the fathead dough. You go, all right, you got the fathead pizza dough. Well, all right. Well, you just ate 50 grams of fat for dinner.
The fathead, you eat one slice.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, except.
And you don't need to put the cheese on top of the fathead. The cheese is in the dough.
Oh my gosh. It's very easy to have way too much fun with ketogenic cooking.
It is. Yeah, it's very true.
As we ironically talk about it with pictures of blueberry muffins.
Yes.
From Scott's
Are those blueberry muffins or his chocolate chip cookies?
Let's talk about that, though, because that's where people go wrong on this, right?
Yeah.
Especially new folks. So what's your recommendation for the
keto treats? They're great. I do eat them. Not often. I didn't eat anything like that this month just because I was noticing I was getting a little bit of insulin every time I ate something that had an artificial sweetener in it. So I would test before I ate and I would be in the 80s. And then I would test after I ate and I'd be in the 70s.
Ooh.
So it's getting a little bit of insulin there, and what I was doing was I would drink a little bit of sweetened, like with Mio or a diet soda when I was fasting. And the purpose of my fasting was to give my pancreas a break, to stop producing all that insulin.
Right.
And so it was sort of defeating the purpose. But the keto treats, back to those. They're fantastic. Scott has them all the time.
Yes, he does.
I like them. I have a little boy, and he loves Scott's chocolate chip cookies and those flax meal crackers. He gobbles those up. To me, they are sort of a once a week sort of deal. Or if you're cooking for a potluck or whatever, and you need to bring something. They're sometimes food. They're okay. I say just give yourself the first month when you're learning the ropes to learn how to make a simple meat and vegetable type meals with added fats. And then, when that kind of starts to get a little dull after a month or 6 weeks, then you can start experimenting, trying some oopsie bread or Hobbit bread or anything like that. And that's Ben's food. Behold the broccoli. I don't see a lot of kale in there though, Ben.
There are at least 2 pictures of kale in there, but they're limited, I admit. All right, so
Ben and I can both get a little crazy about the vegetables. We start screaming broccoli at people pretty quick.
Yeah,
that's a lot what my food looks like too. I'll put together a little mural of my food.
The reason I wanted to throw this up while Karen was talking is, especially that first month, it can be really easy to cling to some old eating patterns. And I don't necessarily think that that's a problem. But one of the things that we don't talk about very often that I just kind of want to touch on, and, this is different for everyone, but let's be honest. There's an emotional component to eating. Many of us have an unhealthy relationship with food that goes way beyond nutrition.
Yes.
And
especially chocolate chip cookies.
And when you start talking about chocolate chip cookies,
I'm glad they're off the screen, actually.
It can get a little weird. And you should be aware of that for yourself. And don't, I hate to use the word trigger food, but why do that to yourself? Make a clean break if you can. If you need a treat, have it.
Just for a little while. Just even if it's just for the first, as I said, the first month. Even if you only want to do the first 2 weeks without it, just try the first 2 weeks eating meats and eggs and fish and vegetables with the added fats.
Absolutely. And I want to be very clear. I made a deliberate point of putting a nice mug cake in there.
Oh, is that a mug cake? I thought that was like a weird broth.
No, that's an almond flour mug cake and whipped cream.
Oh, I see the whipped cream. Okay.
Because that's as close to keto cooking as you ought to get that first month.
That's usually what my keto cooking looks like. It's that first month. If I was going to do something, it was a flax meal mug or an almond flour mug cake. It wasn't very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a chocolate person, you can pick up some Lily bars. You can pick up, baking chocolate and make these chocolate flavored mug cakes and throw some whipped cream on them.
Pink monstrosity.
Oh, don't start with that.
Pink thing. Mike put up his little things. What are things you would never eat that you see posted all the time? That was my number one. That whatever that pink thing is, and then the thread after that was, I love that. How do you order that?
How do I order the pink thing from
Started?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the pink thing. So just 1 month.
Keep it simple. I mean, look at some of this food, and this is all very keto-friendly food.
Yeah, there are chicken wings there, people.
Normal vegetables, chicken wings. There's even one of those fathead dough pizzas in there.
Or is that a pizza?
Yeah. No, that's a regular fathead. I've got little eggplant pizzas on there, stuffed mushrooms, loaded broccoli, meatballs. I've got zoodles on there.
I'm missing cheese.
Yeah.
I decided to try a month without dairy, and it's the month. This has been a very long month. I'm pretty sure there's at least 50 days in June now. I'm dying.
Yeah.
If you just try that. I mean, there are so many good recipes out there that are so tasty, that are vegetable and meat and a healthy fat base. I like ruledme.com a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They have some fantastic stuff in there. I made a Kung Pao chicken that was better than anything that that my in-laws ordered from the Chinese food restaurant that day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if this is a good chance, if you're from the ketogenic oat diet group, make sure that you're a member of the sister group, which is the Keto Plus. You can get to the link off the pinned post. The reason you don't see a lot of food discussion in our group is we actually have two groups that are the same administrators. We just split the group in half.
Yes.
One side is all recipes all the time, and the other side is, discussions about macros and vitamins and stuff like that.
Salt.
So definitely join that sister group and look for, any kind of recipes or help with specific kinds of foods. If you're having a craving for Kung Pao chicken, go, hey, does anybody have a good link to Kung Pao chicken? And
I do.
And Karen will hook you up.
Yeah.
All right, Karen. Well, that was a pretty good introduction to macros and kind of some general philosophy about intermittent fasting using the macros. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should cover in this intro to macros?
Well, as far as the fat throttle goes, as people are going along and they're losing weight and they're looking to reduce fat and their calorie intake, there are very simple substitutions. Like people often start off, they might be having the BPCs, change that to a couple of tablespoons of heavy whipping cream, and then eventually you'll be having, coffee with almond milk. Or last night I changed up my usual crack slaw recipe. I cut the oil in half, and I used, instead of a medium ground beef, I used ground turkey.
Nice.
You just start doing stuff like that, and it kicks that throttle in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to reiterate one more time, the first few weeks are just the adaptation to the style of food, the style of cooking, getting your shopping list straight, getting your menu ideas under control. Mm-hmm. Don't stress too much about it in the first couple weeks. Just focus on making sure that there are no sneaky carbs in your life. Mm-hmm. This is really for, that discussion about it. After those first couple weeks, you start getting into that week 3 through week 6 is when you really start needing to pay close attention to what you're doing, how you're doing, and how to optimize the journey that you're going to be on for the next few months.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap this up. It's about 55 minutes. So we don't want to make it too long for folks. So I think this is a good stopping point.
Excellent.
Well, thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. I'm going to slow her down here. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.